Okay, just want to thank everybody once again for rejoining the qigong class and helping me practice and having benefits that you're telling me about and all that. It's awesome. And when I was farm sitting, I was able to read Master Nan Huai-chin book, Working Toward Enlightenment. And I started his second book, Realizing Enlightenment. And I had first read his books right after my enlightenment experience, is what Master Chen Yulin called it, or Lin Chen Yi. I guess you're supposed to. Anyway, so when I first read Master Nan's books, that was 23 years ago. 23 years ago, and it's just like way too much information at first. It was information overload. So it's just a really nice relief for me to return back to his books 23 years later and feel like I can sort of get a better handle on what he's saying, because I have some better understanding of some of the contextual information he's describing. One of the key points he makes, he says that he's revealing for the first time in this Working Towards Enlightenment book that the Taoist alchemy, one of the most famous Taoist alchemy texts that relies on the Tai diagram, and I mentioned it in my own training manual, but he says that text was inspired by Zen, or what's commonly called Zen from Japan, but it's actually Chan, a Chan master. So Master Nan Huai-chin, he's considered a Zen or Chan master. And so the Japanese term Zen comes from the Chinese term Chan, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but CH''AN, which was originally like Chiana from the Sanskrit. Let me try to get better at lighting here. The Sanskrit word dhyana, which means concentration. So if you study like Indian meditation and yoga, you'll learn about samadhi, and the first level of samadhi is concentration. And actually, that's one compliment I had from the qigong teachers, is that qigong master Jim Nance said that I had the best mental concentration of any student he had met. And now, obviously, it sounds really nice, but actually, well, one of the things that Master Nan Huai-chin talks about is something they call dead tree Zen, which is this idea that if you're able to just empty out your conceptual mind, as the space between your thoughts, then eventually you'll start seeing light and then eventually the light will become very bright, and this would be like opening the third eye. But if you just stay in that realm of the emptiness, then it's called dead tree Zen, because you're ignoring your body and also the basically like the movement of the universe, the impermanence of the universe. So even the emptiness can become another deep level, a deep habit of the ego, of the spiritual ego, the seventh level of consciousness. So the Master Nan Huai-chin, he's a teacher of Buddhism, of Zen Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, which in the West we think of it as something very simplistic. And the idea of Zen is you have sudden enlightenment, where you have some sort of breakthrough experience and you're suddenly enlightened. But this would be just, again, the emptiness, the space between the thoughts. And then Master Nan Huai-chin says that even if you have sudden enlightenment, you still require gradual enlightenment, which would be years and years of meditation, or just like endless meditation. He's basically saying, like, if you want to be successful, you're what would be considered normal living for most people would be just a small part of your life, and then your meditation would be your main life, for even during sleep and all that. Anyway, so obviously he's like, well, most people in the modern world, they already have their lives are way too complicated already. So I think it's probably in realizing enlightenment, he's like, well, it's better to probably not even meditate in the modern world, because it's easy. You can get very angry very easily because you purify your mind and your body or whatever, and so you can get like self-righteous anger very easily, which is sort of like I'm trying to think in terms of Buddhism here, because when I mentioned before that he said, well, the Taoist alchemy tradition actually came out of Zen Buddhism, out of the esoteric Buddhism. And another point he makes is all these great Zen or Chan masters. I'll just call him Chan because he's very critical of Japanese Zen. But the Chan masters that a lot of them came out of Sichuan, the province of China, Sichuan, which I haven't checked the map recently, but I think it borders Tibet, or it's closer. It's on the western side of China at any rate. But his point is like, well, the esoteric Buddhism of Tibet is also a big part of Chan Buddhism. And of course, everybody's heard of Shaolin and Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was the founder of I guess it was Shaolin, or at least the Shaolin training, the martial arts that are also rely on Zen Buddhism. So the big point of Chan Master Nan Huai-chin is that you have to also empty out the body in order to achieve what they call supreme complete enlightenment in Mahayana Buddhism. And the basic way to summarize Mahayana Buddhism versus Hinayana Buddhism is that you have seen truth, which is the Dharmakaya of the emptiness, as the sort of like the essence of Buddhism, the absolute void. And then you have cultivating realization, which is the actual meditation training, which is a lifelong, eternal process. Even you can even do it in the afterlife, apparently, but nobody really knows, like, you know. And then you have carrying out vows, and carrying out vows is what is commonly called bodhisattva, which would be you delay your supreme complete enlightenment in order to have compassion and kindness and unconditional love and forgiveness, and basically like help others to decrease suffering and to increase the joy and positive emotions and healing. And so he says that the Taoist alchemy training, like the small universe meditation or the microcosmic orbit, that's actually, he's like, that's a really important part of the Chan Buddhism, because you have to increase the qi in your body in order to empty out the body, which is also called the first 5 levels of consciousness. In Mahayana Buddhism, there's 8 levels of consciousness, and the 8th level of consciousness is the, like, what they call the storehouse consciousness of the universe, but it's also directly tied to the first 5 levels of consciousness of the body. And the 5 levels are also tied to your senses. So you have like I'll probably get this wrong, but I think it's like your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue. What is that, 4? And then your thinking, which is 5. Okay, so eyes, ears, nose, tongue, thinking. Okay, so, and then you have in Buddhism, well, he emphasizes, Master Nan, Huai-chin, he emphasizes like Hinayana is also called Theravada Buddhism in the Southeast Asia and in India. And so his point is like, well, look, Hinayana, it's not bad. You have to do Hinayana. You have to do the Hinayana training in order to also do Mahayana. Mahayana just being the carrying out of the vows. Now, the sort of like the debate is like, well, if everything's just emptiness, then why should you have to carry out vows? Because, everything is, like, he's like, it's his point is like, look, it's just because it's empty doesn't mean it's not an illusion. It exists, but it's just temporary. It's temporary, and what is the emptiness is actually this interdependent origination. And he makes the connection that there's in Hinayana Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism, there's the 12 interdependent causes of origination. And he says that that's actually tied to the 12 double hours of Taoist cosmology, where you have the small universe, or small heavenly circuit, the microcosmic orbit of the body, based on in Taoist alchemy, based on the 12 double hours. And so he's directly connecting Buddhism to the Taoist alchemy. Now, he also talks about the Kuan Yin, the Kuan Yin method, which is Kuan Yin being a Buddha that translates in Chinese as sound current. And so the Buddha taught Kuan Yin, and I guess she has he or she has different names in different sects based on whether it's India or China, or I'm not sure. But the thing is that the method is also called the inner ear method, and it's considered to be the best method for our time, but it's also tied to the breathing method, which is anapana. I think I'm saying that correctly, but so in other words, like when you do the small universe meditation, you're relying on both breathing synchronization along with sound synchronization and listening. And so his whole point is like, well, with Kuan Yin as inner ear method, you start out with mantras and listening, but you're actually like, the emptiness is listening to you. It's this process of the emptiness. And of course, his big point is like, well, eventually, if you do this practice, the body, when it fills up with qi, then you have to get beyond what in Buddhism is called the skandha form, which is the skandha meaning like covering or sheath. And so you have to empty it out. And you do that through the prana, or the wisdom of the consciousness being the light, the Shen or spirit. So you have to have this awareness as light, as the prana, the wisdom. And so as the light increases, then you start to empty out the realm of form. And so what he does by not just connecting the 12 interdependent causes of origination with the 12 energy points of the small universe meditation, he also says that in Buddhism you have the realm of desire and the realm of form, and then the formless realm. And you have to be liberated, you have to transcend all three realms. But he says that those aren't just astral realms, but they're realms of the body. So the lower body is the realm of desire, and the middle of the body is the realm of form, and then the brain, the third eye, is the formless realm. And he has an image diagram to describe this. And so he's saying that in Taoist alchemy, you are converting the life force or Jing to Qi as you empty out the realm of desire, and then you're converting the Qi to Shen or spirit as a prana or wisdom when you empty out the realm of form as the middle of the body through the heart. And then you use the Shen or spirit to then empty out the emptiness. So you turn the relative void into the absolute void that's always radiating awareness. And eventually, this process will achieve what is achieved in Taoist alchemy, where a person will create a yin shen. They'll build up their light energy in the body so they can have their a spirit leave their body, like astral travel. And if they can maintain this energy, then they can be aware. They can maintain awareness once they leave their body, even permanently. But otherwise, a normal person doesn't maintain awareness. It's like they just enter like into a dream state. So then and then eventually as you turn the spirit into emptiness in the formless realm, you can actually transmute matter also. And so you're able to create a new what in Buddhism is called the nirmanakaya. So you have the dharmakaya, which is the seeing the truth as the essence of the Buddhism, of the absolute void, as interdependent origination. And so you have this eternal process of as the essence or truth, as the dharmakaya. But then the nirmanakaya would be this ability to create another physical body, which in Daoism is called the yang shen, or golden immortal body. And then in this process, you also create the samboya kaya, excuse me for mispronouncing that, but that would be like the realm of the body of bliss, which would be like the energy body from the yin shen. Or so you have the yang shen as the nirmanakaya, and then the yin shen as the body of bliss, as the samboya kaya. And so basically he doesn't dwell on Daoism, but he does basically integrate Daoism with Buddhism. So that's very fascinating in that sense. And then I got like halfway through realizing cultivation, where that book is focused more on the actual samadhi training. And he's like, well, it's easier to talk about what samadhi is not. And this makes sense because Buddhism in India was considered a non-orthodox path, or like a heterodox path, and it's based on the logic of neti, which is neither this nor that. And so instead of like a positive affirmation of, like God, or what they call Brahman, in India, Brahman, but Buddhism was trying to emphasize that you have to say neither this nor that, because it's not a conceptual truth. It's an experiential truth that is also impersonal, and yet it's a eternal process of information or awareness. And so, like, for example, what the 8th level of consciousness is what they call the alaya consciousness, which is also like the storehouse consciousness or the seed consciousness. And this would be what is commonly considered to be like the Akasha records, where But if you empty out this final level of consciousness of the universe, then you achieve what's called the divine mirror or the transcendental mirror. And essentially, if you think of like reality as being holographic, where all of matter and all of space-time would then be emptied out, and you'd have this eternal wisdom of that can also transmute matter and everything, and so you'd be like one with the universe. And at that level, your whole body can disappear, physically disappear. And okay, so he's saying realistically, in his experience, most people cannot even achieve the first 100 days of training, which is the Taoist, what they call the gong, which is the first level of Taoist alchemy, which would be just filling up your body with qi and getting beyond the skandha of form. And there's 5 skandhas or coverings in Buddhism. So you have the skandha of form, then you have the skandha of sensation, and then you have the skandha of conception, and then you have the skandha of what they call synthesis, which is like your motivation, the motivation of your perceptions. So it's also called the samskara, skandha of samskara, or like the skandha of your intentions. And then the 5th skandha, let's see if I got that right, form, conception, sensation, synthesis, and then the 5th one is consciousness, the skandha of consciousness. And it's basically like, well, that's the final skandha that has to be emptied out. And now the irony of in Mahayana Buddhism, they're basically like, well, in order to empty out the 8th consciousness, you have to empty out the first 5 consciousness of the body. And so that's very, very, very difficult. And so most people, they can't even, get beyond the skandha of form. And one thing he describes, he says, you will definitely have this experience of this bliss that rains down from the top of the center of the head. And I had that experience, and when I had that experience, I had never read Master Nan, Huai-chin before. And I read his book, Tao and Longevity, and he describes that experience in that book. And when I read that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I had this experience. And then he's like, he describes it again in Working Toward Enlightenment, or maybe it's Realizing Enlightenment. But he's like, you're required to have this experience in order, before you go into samadhi, to enter into samadhi. So it's like, okay, I actually did have that experience. But of course, I was being helped by Chini Lin. And Chini Lin is basically, he trained at Shaolin. So he's part of the Zen, the Chan tradition. And he just finished his Tibetan monk chanting that he does every year. And again, that's part of the esoteric Buddhist lineage with the Tibetan monks. And Master Nan Huai-chin, he talks about the Tibetan Buddhist tradition with the history behind the Gelugpa monks. That was what Chen Yilin was part of. And of course, Chen Yilin, he focuses on Buddhism just as much as he does on Daoism, if not more. And so there, and of course in China, there's been this sort of like, um, I w- I'd like to say friendly debate or rivalry or something between Daoism and Buddhism, but or collaboration. How about collaboration? And but of course the like Master Nan Huai-chin's big point is like, well, even if you achieve all these abilities where you can, like, even if you can create another physical body, that's still not enlightenment in terms of Buddhism, because the whole point of Buddhism is that you have to rely on seeing truth, the seeing truth being this impermanence that's an independent origination as impermanence. So it's what in Advaita Vedanta of India is called formless awareness, but it's a process. In Buddhism, they really emphasize that this is a process. It's a eternal motion as formless awareness. And of course, you see this problem a lot in Western meditation, and he critiques this a lot too. He says, well, there's a Dutch teacher who relies on a German or something like that, and they're saying, well, you can just empty out your thoughts, and eventually you don't even have to meditate. You can just keep emptying out your thoughts, and eventually you'll. He's like, well, that's true, but it just becomes psychological. He's like, unless you empty out your body and do the yoga training, then if your body's unhealthy, then when you leave your body, then you lose the samadhi, because it ends up being psychological, and so you have to maintain this physiological connection with what in Daoism is called Wan Qi, which would be the Dharmakaya. In Buddhism, they would just call that, well, they call it the essence. So when they say essence, that term is also used in the Taoist alchemy book, as they use the term essence, but what they really mean is this unification between life force and energy and spirit. It's like he's like, okay, well, most meditators, they cannot empty out the skandha of form, and so that's basically all limited to fire and water. And so if you think of the spirit as fire and then the life force is water, then you're putting the fire under the water in order to create to empty out the realm of form, which would be the qi. You create the boiling heat, the steam. The steam as the boiling water, as the qi. And and so the problem is that one of the things that Master Nan Huai-chin mentioned that I took note of after my falling out of enlightenment experience, whatever. He says that for most modern practitioners, they will have heroic over exuberance, and then they'll use their spiritual powers, and then they fall back into worldliness, and so that perfectly describes what happened, what I experienced. And then but he says, like, even if you can do meditation to maintain your health for health and longevity, then that's great. That's a great thing too. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. But he's like, if you're going to be a monk, the first thing, of course, is you have to maintain the purification and all that, and that's very, very difficult in modern times, and to empty out the body, the purification of the body and stuff, and so that's why when he goes into the samadhi, he's like, even these Zen masters, they might achieve the Dharmakaya, which would be they've emptied out their sixth level and seventh level of consciousness, so they can empty out their conceptual mind of thinking, and they can empty out their spiritual ego. So all they experience is this absolute void of light everywhere. And so they've emptied out the skandha of form, but they have not yet emptied out the skandha of sensation, and because their bodies will still be susceptible, their bodies will still be susceptible to this, in the end, what becomes a psychological limitation. And so his point is like, well, look, it's actually fairly easy to become like an arhat, what in traditional, in Hinayana Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism is what they call an arhat. And he's like, if you do that and you can empty out the conceptual mind and the spiritual ego, he's like, that's a great accomplishment. But that, you'll actually like step out of the cycle of karmic rebirth, for quite a long time by achieving that. And personally, I don't quite understand the whole like wanting to escape the cyclic karma cycle or whatever. But I guess it's because, like his point is like, well, if you're full of desires in the realm of desire, then you're probably going to get reborn as an animal, and that like Chen Yilin, he said right now the element fire is in control on Earth, and we're entering a realm of chaos for the next 20 years, because fire's in charge. But Master Nan Huai-chin, he says fire is that's actually desire. That's in the realm of desire. So that's like the hell, like that's literally like the hell beings or whatever. Like we've turned Earth into hell, and so based on that would mean that humans now would get reborn as animals or some kind of animals, hopefully. But he says, I think he talks about the hungry ghosts, that he's like bacteria are considered hungry ghosts in Buddhism, something like that. So the hungry ghosts are actually technically a type of animal, maybe. Okay, so the whole point is like to decrease your suffering and to increase your joy, the positive emotions. But even eventually, even if you empty out the realm of the formless realm, then you're even beyond any emotions. But then again, in Mahayana Buddhism, the whole point is that you are carrying out your vows, which would be you delay this final emptying out of the formless realm, and you focus on decreasing suffering. And he's like, that's why medicine, studying medicine of the body is such an important thing in the Chinese meditation tradition, so you can focus on like healing and helping to reduce suffering and being a bodhisattva that way or whatever. And so essentially he's like, even these great Zen masters, a lot of them, their bodies will get sick, but then there's part of them there's part of their mind that can separate from the body, and so it will, by when you empty out the seventh level of consciousness, essentially, while you're still alive, you can still detach from your physical suffering, and so it's like a deep psychological awakening in that sense, that you can enter a level of emptiness that goes beyond, like because your heartbeat slows down, your breathing slows down when you're, and but on the other hand, if you can empty out your body, then when your body's filled with qi, then you'll be able to heal yourself, and then eventually empty out the eighth level of consciousness. So there's this constant inner relationship between a deep psychological and physiological transformation that then interacts with the Dharmakaya of the universe, of beyond space, even beyond space. So he talks about the elements. One of the elements is space, along with the four elements of the body in Buddhism from India, and then the wind element is the qi, and then the consciousness is the final element. I think there's like 7 elements or something. Can't remember. Anyway, so when he starts getting into samadhi and the different Zen masters, and he's got tons of stories, and he's always quoting poetry and commenting about poetry and the different schools of Buddhism. It's just super complex. Like he's mastered all the different schools of Buddhism, and connecting it to Daoism, and he's got it all memorized, and then so he's giving these lectures, and then they got turned, and he knows they're going to be books, so the lecture series will be books, and these books are free online, working toward enlightenment and realizing enlightenment. And on the one hand, it's kind of like it's way too complicated, but he calls this the adding. Like in Tibetan, in esoteric Buddhism, they have one of the strategies is to keep adding, and you keep adding more complexity, and then your mind eventually just like empties out from all the complexity. And then on the other hand, the Zen of the seen truth, or Chan Buddhism, is based on simplicity. So you're taking away, and that's why you can have this example of somebody like, looking at a flower, and then they achieve permanent enlightenment. And he's like, people, they hear these stories and they have no idea that the person who had that breakthrough sudden enlightenment had spent like decades doing gradual enlightenment of being a monk and meditating and studying all the religious teachings, all the sutras. He quotes probably like 50 different sutras and treatises. Among the 2 books, he probably quotes like 100 different texts. And some of these are the Taoist alchemy texts, like the Triplex Unity. And so it's, you could spend a lifetime just studying his work. If you studied, you could read all the texts. I guess a lot of them are still just in Chinese. They're not translated into English. So What else can I mention? But his whole point is like, well, look, if you think you've achieved enlightenment, then that's not enlightenment, because that's immediately it's like it's and of course um that he's like, well, actually all matter is made of light. That's another thing. He's like, well, Buddha demonstrated this. And he's like, well, if you're a Buddhist monk, even though you achieve the spiritual powers, you cannot demonstrate them. You can't. And so um it's kind of a paradox, right? Because if you're doing Mahayana Buddhism, or if you're doing like a Bodhisattva vows, then that would include like healing and stuff like that. But the paradox being that it's not you doing it. That's the whole point. It's like, it's not you doing it. So then he's like, there's a fine line between spiritual powers and insanity. and there's even a term for that in Tibetan yoga. They call it crazy Zen, where I don't know if he uses that term too. I don't remember noticing it in this what I read, but maybe it's later. It's probably later in the Realizing Enlightenment book. But essentially, it's basically like, well, with the Zen in the Chan Buddhism, you can sort of like do your own thing outside of the monastery, and and people might not understand it at all. Like he said, like I think it was the third patriarch of the Zen Buddhist tradition passed, or maybe it was the second patriarch. He passed it on to the third patriarch, so he already passed on the lineage. And then after that, he just went to the brothels. Like he spent the rest of his life in the brothels and that they're drinking and living it up. And then like, if anybody questioned him about it, he'd just be like, "Look, I'm emptying out my, I'm clearing out my blockages, or emptying out whatever." And I don't know. So the whole point is like, well, with Zen, they could like, he's very critical of Japanese Zen, because he's like, they don't practice the full lotus meditation enough. Like he makes fun of monks if they cannot sit in full lotus meditation for 1 week nonstop. He's like, you got to be able to sit for 1 week nonstop in full lotus meditation, just to achieve the first level of samadhi. And then eventually you can achieve this level of samadhi where there's no thoughts. But again, he's like, as the samadhi levels, they intensify, and as they intensify, you have to empty out the body. You can't just maintain this psychological thing. And he's like, a lot of the problem with the how Zen is known to be is like these witty paradoxes, these what they call koans, or what these sayings that are supposed to empty out your mind, to make you have great doubt about reality, and then you have sudden enlightenment, right? But he's like, that very, very easily it just becomes this literary conceptual thing. And he's like, if you're meditating and you think you've achieved emptiness, then you have not achieved it, because that's just another conceptual hang up. And so it's like, there's this paradox where you can never, it has to always be an impersonal process of interdependent origination, which I would rather just call that listening. What in Advaita Vedanta they call it Muna Samadhi, or that's what Ramana Maharshi calls it, Muna Samadhi. And then his main student, Punjaji of Ramana Maharshi, Punjaji took a great liking to Zen Buddhism, and so he's like, basically Zen Buddhism is Advaita Vedanta. They're the same thing. But then if you read Bill Beaudry, who's a Western student of Master Nan Huai-chin, and he actually wrote the foreword to these books that were published by Samuel Weiser. And Bill Beaudry has a book called like Measuring Meditation, and he's very critical of Advaita Vedanta because he's like, well, basically, they're not emptying out the body; they're just doing the mind meditation, and so they're emptying out the 6th and 7th level of consciousness, and then when their bodies are no longer healthy, when they're about to leave their body permanently, then their mind cannot maintain awareness, and so that it goes into oblivion, and it just like blacks out like in deep dreamless sleep, and then you lose this connection to the formless awareness. The samadhi has to be this light. You have to rely on the spirit. The spirit has to be turned around in order to first activate the Dharmakaya. So that awareness is built into the Buddhism process of what they call prana, or transcendental wisdom. So they insist that you have to be spiritually aware of what's happening, of everything else, but at the same time, it has to be an impersonal awareness that's a formless, what they call in the end, it's called the divine mirror, the transcendental divine mirror. So it's a pretty fascinating, like, I suppose if you called that like holographic, like a holographic reality, that would make sense to me, what you would experience. So you have to just keep deepening that process, and that would be the Bodhisattva vows. But this is also what Taoist alchemy describes as well, is that after your initial enlightenment experience, then you have to have this interaction with the external world, so that your own body's transformations are interwoven with your external reality transformations. And so it's kind of like, it's pretty much hard to describe in terms of conceptual awareness, or especially in Western logic, in terms of Western logic. And so the other thing that Master Nan, he talks about Yogacara being the Indian philosophy of consciousness only based on logic. And so he's saying that that's very closely tied to the Zen Chan Buddhist tradition as well. But he's like, they don't like it in China because China, they want the Chinese culture, they want simplicity, they want visualization, and they want like direct awareness, like the sudden enlightenment through experience. So they don't want this logical, dry, rational, analysis that just goes on and on and on. And so, he goes through all these different, basically like methods of Buddhism, philosophies, different styles of Buddhism, and he compares and contrasts them, and so it's very easy to like get confused by his work. At the same time, he's like, there's a lot of controversy about him as well. Like, well, what did he personally achieve? He describes one experience where his friend meditating with him achieves the rainbow body, and he sticks his hand in his friend's body. He's like, okay, now that you've achieved that, when are you gonna, that's not real Buddhism, because, again, the whole point is like, whatever you achieve, that's your ego. Like, if you're aware of it, then that's your ego. So then you have to go back into the emptiness, and you have to have this eternal process of formless awareness. And so you can never be satisfied, like, oh, I've achieved this, this is. And so he basically, he goes through like all the different abilities of the spiritual powers, and he's basically like, well, that's not Buddhism. That's not the Dharmakaya of seeing truth as the essence of Chan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism. So that's all I'm gonna say, because I'm reaching my hour limit. What else? Of course, in his own life, he like worked on trying to help integrate mainland China with Taiwan, which is controversial. He did a lot of business deals, which are controversial. I guess he smoked, and that was controversial. He lived to be 94, which, he practiced. I didn't know this, but he only slept 2 hours a day, and he said that was because he did a small universe meditation, or he had those channels open. So he wasn't against Daoism at all. He had it all integrated. And he also talked about Confucianism a lot too. And of course, as a Westerner, I really don't know what I'm talking about at all. And so it's like fascinating. He was a bestseller in China, but he's hardly discussed in the West, really. But he was a professor in Taiwan, and I had a good friend in high school whose parents were from Taiwan, and then he moved back to Taiwan, and he doesn't like Westerners or white people. I don't know. he's but anyway, so yeah, so I'll just keep studying Master Nan Huai-chin. And at first when I read them, I'm like, am I wasting my time here? Like, this is like, I'm learning that the conceptual mind is not, like, you don't want the conceptual mind, but he's using so many concepts to explain this. But then he's like, well, we need to study Western science too, and connect that to Buddhism. And so that's what I did. I did that for 20 years. I was inspired by Master Nan Huai-chin to then study Western science, and that's how I ended up focusing on non-commutativity and connecting that back to non-Western meditation. And so I will leave it at that. And yeah, I quote him in my other books. I quote those books, so you can read those quotes also. And I will keep reading them. If I have anything more to say, then I won't hold back. Thanks.